my life, removing pain. Lord, let my words heal a heart that hurts. I want to spend my life mending broken people. I want to spend my life mending broken people.
Welcome to today's cooking program, where we're going to be talking about how to attack insulin resistance with food. So my name is Lucia Tiffany. I'm a nurse and health educator, and I'm so happy to be able to be with you here today. So as we talk about insulin resistance, what are we even talking about? Well, we will learn as we go through this program. Before we get into our recipes, I want to encourage you to grab a pen and a piece of paper so that you can take some notes in our program today. Because my style is I don't just cook, but I also like to teach at the same time. So you might have some tips you want to write down as we go through the program. We are going to be talking about how to use food to increase your insulin sensitivity. This is something that is important for everyone. This is not something that is just for people that might be struggling with prediabetes or diabetes or other things where you might have heard that term insulin before. As we will discover, insulin sensitivity is important for us to have good long-term health. In fact, insulin resistance is a big problem that many of us are suffering from, and that can be drastically impacted by our food choices. So we're going to explore that in our program today. As we think about the word insulin, let me just give you a little starter clue on what insulin is all about. It's really pretty simple. In our bodies, when we eat carbohydrates, it goes into our blood in the form of glucose or simple sugar, and then it needs to be ferried into our body cells where it can be burned for energy. This is a very basic part of our body's metabolism. Insulin is like a key that opens the door into the cell for the sugar to be able to leave the bloodstream and get into the cell. And so that's the way our normal metabolism works. The situation with insulin resistance is that that key isn't working like it should. The insulin is not opening the door to the cell easily as it should, and so sugar tends to back up in the bloodstream, or insulin levels tend to go high. And we'll talk about why that is a little bit later. So insulin sensitivity is something that helps all of us to have not only a better metabolism, but better health. So today, in our first recipe, we are going to be talking about a way that we can use our breakfast foods to help us increase insulin sensitivity. Our first recipe today is Oat Groat Delight. If you want to take a look with me, maybe take a screenshot, we're going to go through these ingredients right now. Has 1 cup of oat groats rinsed, 2 tablespoons of raisins, 2 dates pitted, 1 whole apple coarsely grated, 1 teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon, half a teaspoon of coriander ground, 4 cups of water, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1 tablespoon of real vanilla extract. I'm going to start with gratering the apple. You can just use an ordinary grater, and it will grate your apple, which is going to provide some natural sweetness for this cereal, because one of the things that helps us with our insulin sensitivity is to avoid refined and processed foods. Refined foods would include things like sugars and oils, And we don't have to compromise taste just because we are moving away from those things. You see, there are a lot of signs of insulin resistance. Maybe you're asking yourself, I don't know if this program is for me or not. I don't think I have insulin resistance. Well, let me tell you what some of the signs of insulin resistance are. Some signs of insulin resistance are being overweight or more than your ideal weight. Sometimes it's manifested by high triglyceride levels. That is a specific kind of lab test that your doctor probably does on your regular yearly physical. So if he's told you that you have high triglycerides, that could be a warning flag for insulin resistance. Also, we find that one of the very common signs of insulin resistance is when our body starts storing fat around our middle. You know, a lot of people think that that's just a normal thing, you know, when you hit 45 and it's just, you know, starts accumulating fat in different parts of your body. But it's actually a sign of insulin resistance. When insulin is not doing its job, it means that more of the glucose in your blood gets shunted into fat storage instead of being burned for fuel. And that storage tends to end up around our abdominal organs. Interestingly enough, when fat is stored around our abdominal organs, it increases our risk for a number of chronic lifestyle diseases. Increases our risk for heart disease, for example. Increases our risk for diabetes, also for high blood pressure. And all of those are things that are major contributors to death in the United States and many developing countries today. So it really is something we want to pay attention to. Another sign of insulin resistance is when we have prediabetes. Maybe the doctor's told you that you have metabolic syndrome, or maybe you have prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, or even type 1 diabetes. We'll talk about that type 1 diabetes a bit more in a second. So I think I'm done with my apple here, and I'm going to get ready to put in the rest of my ingredients. Now, this next ingredient we're going to deal with here is oat groats. The oat groats are the whole oat grain. We're all very familiar with things like old-fashioned oats or quick oats and maybe even steel-cut oats. But many people are not aware of oat groats. Oat groats look a lot like wheat berries, but it's the whole kernel of the oat grain. And when we are looking to increase our insulin sensitivity, it really helps when we eat grains that are intact. That means they haven't been refined, nothing taken away, or processed in any way. Even rolling the grain or cutting the grain or like making it into quick oats, all of those are forms of processing which release the carbohydrates from the grain into our bloodstream faster, requiring higher levels of insulin to be produced from our pancreas to take care of that spike in blood sugar. So if you know that you're dealing with an insulin resistance issue, like one of the ones we've talked about, you will find that if you focus your grain intake on intact grains, you're going to be a lot better off. The intact grains take longer to digest, and therefore they don't raise your blood sugar very quickly, unlike more processed grains, and especially grains that have been ground finely into flour. So many people that are pre-diabetic or diabetic will find that they can tolerate the carbohydrates in whole grains better if they're using an intact whole grain. So we're going to add to our oat groats some raisins, a few dates. These are both forms of natural sweetener, and it doesn't take very much to really give a nice flavor to this hot cereal dish. This is a dish that you can prepare the night before, put it in your oven, set the timer, and wake up to a kitchen that smells delightful and hot cereal ready for you. This is a whole grain, and so it takes longer to cook than a lot of other kinds of cereals. And I just added the cinnamon and the vanilla all the rest of our seasonings there. And basically, you're just going to mix this up with the liquid, and it's ready to bake. Now, because it's a whole grain, it takes, if you put it in the oven, which is the first way we're going to talk about, it'll take about 2 hours to cook. It's really important that our grains be cooked thoroughly for best digestion. And because it's intact, it's still going to have plenty of texture. It will not get mushy on you. So make sure you cook it thoroughly. I'm going to cover it with a piece of tin foil so that all of the liquid stays in it and you don't lose that liquid that's going to cook the grain. The grain is going to soak it all up, and you'll have a very nice consistency hot cereal ready when you're done. So 2 hours in the oven at 350 will do it. If you have an Instant Pot, which is a pressure cooker, you can pressure cook it in the Instant Pot with a manual setting for just 45 minutes, and it will be done. So depending on how much time you have, you can use either one of those cooking methods. So next, we are going to take a look at a graphic that looks at some of the different steps associated with plant-based eating. I'm going to introduce it to you right now, and we'll come back and talk more about the individual steps in a few minutes. But the thing I want to show you here is that we have some steps here that I have labeled 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And all of these are ways of eating plant-based. But some of them are better for increasing our insulin sensitivity than others. The closer we get to 12, the more insulin sensitivity we will experience. So we're going to talk about how we can take these steps and start from wherever we are. Even if we aren't plant-based yet, we can start from wherever we are and go through these steps to increase our insulin sensitivity step by step. So let's take a look at our next recipe. The ingredients for our next recipe are starting with 1 bunch of collard, because this recipe is what I call not so southern collard greens. Takes 1 bunch of collards, 2 cloves of garlic crushed, a tablespoon of oil, which is optional, and a sprinkle of salt. Very simple, but delicious. So you want to pick the nicest collard greens that you can find at the market. You want to look for collard greens that aren't bruised and that have a nice deep green color to them. Of all the different greens on your grocery store shelf, these are kind of like the biggest ones. They're almost like little umbrellas. They're so big. But they have quite a thick stem on them. And so I cut the stem out first so that it can cook a little bit longer. So I'm going to do that first of all. So I just kind of lay them sideways and cut out the fat part of the stem. But don't throw them away, because the stems are an important source of fiber and they actually have a lot of nutrition in them as well. Collard greens are an excellent choice if you are on a budget, because collard greens are actually one of the cheapest cruciferous vegetables. Cruciferous vegetables are all of those vegetables that are in the cabbage family and are very rich in sulfur, which is very important for maintaining our health and for having the best metabolism and blood sugars. So you can get a lot of the sulfur compounds from cabbages, cauliflower, broccoli, but of all of those, collards is the cheapest. So you get a lot of bang for your buck here. And with collards, it's one of those things that you can actually grow in your garden really easily. So I would encourage you to plant and grow collards if at all possible. They can tolerate a pretty wide variety of climates, and so they can be grown in many parts of the country and many parts of the world. They're a deep green leafy vegetable, which means they're very rich in the phytonutrients that are important for your body. They're also very high in fiber. One of the great things about fiber is that it helps to regulate blood sugars. So if you have trouble with blood sugars, which are often associated with problems with insulin and insulin resistance, then this is a really good way to go. I have my pot hot, which is one of the secrets to oil-free cooking. You can hear it sizzle as I put in the big stems that I cut up pretty thin. And then I'm just going to keep these moving in the pot. And then I'm going to add a little garlic to it pretty soon. I'm just going to let those sear a little bit. I like to use a garlic press. When you use a press on the garlic and crush the garlic, it actually releases even more of the health-giving portions of the garlic. Garlic is such a rich food. It helps to fight cancer. It's an antiviral, an antifungal, so it helps us fight against infections. It's just a really powerful food. So I just added just a little bit of water with the garlic because I don't want the garlic to burn. The garlic will turn kind of bitter tasting if you let it burn. So we want a little bit of liquid in here, not very much. We don't want it swimming in liquid. And while that's starting to cook, I'm going to go ahead and chop these big leaves just kind of coarsely. I might cut them a few times lengthwise and then cut them crosswise so that you kind of have bite-sized chunks. All of the cruciferous vegetables are very good for us, one of the reasons being that they're such a wonderful source of fiber. But collards of all of the different cruciferous well, I'm not going to put that in quite yet. Let's let this soften just a little bit more. I like to cook the stems longer than the leaves because it's nice to have the stems tender and you don't want to overcook the leaves. You will notice that I'm going real easy on the amount of water that I'm putting in here because I want to make sure that when I'm done that there isn't extra liquid in the pan. There are a lot of water-soluble nutrients in the greens, all the different greens, and in the collards. And if we have too much water, we cook them in a large amount of water, a lot of those water-soluble nutrients get left in the water and we don't end up eating them. So that can be a problem. We want to get all the nutrition we can from it. So making sure we don't use an excess amount of water is important for that. Once you notice that the collard stems are starting to soften and get a little bit translucent, you can add the leaves. And then you can turn your heat down a bit. This one's, I think, already down to its lowest. And put, if you need a little bit of water, it looks like my pan's a little dry. It could use a little more water, but and just put in all the water you can. It only takes 2 or 3 tablespoons at a time. So if you notice it getting a little dry, you can just add a little water and just check it because you don't want it to scorch. Then you can put a lid on the pot and just kind of let those collards steam for probably 15 minutes or so. You want them to still have a nice color to them, but they need to be tender. It's one of the coarser leafy vegetables, and they are usually more palatable if they're cooked till they're tender. You know, collards are rich in a substance we don't find in a lot of other vegetables called glucoraphanin, which is something that helps to prevent leaky gut syndrome. A lot of people suffer with leaky gut syndrome, which can be a precursor to things like food allergies. This also helps to protect the stomach lining and prevents bacterial growth. Collards are also a very rich source of iron. And so a lot of people that are anemic, they're like, we're going to get iron. Well, collards are a wonderful place to get iron. Keep checking your greens. Make sure you add little bits of water if you need to as you go along. And so we will be setting this aside soon and just let it simmer. And it will also, you'll notice as the greens wilt, they will release liquid as well. So pretty soon you'll have some liquid in there that you hadn't added. When you have a lot of fiber in your meal, it helps your blood sugars to stabilize because it allows the carbohydrates that you've eaten in the same meal to be absorbed slower. And as they go into your blood slower, it means that the insulin can take care of it. Your pancreatic insulin output can help it go where it needs to go, and it doesn't have to deal with large amounts of simple sugars all at once at the end of a meal. When you do this, it really kind of flattens your blood sugar curve, makes it much easier to control blood sugars, and can often make the difference in the amount of medications that diabetics need. The more insulin sensitive they are, the less medications they will need. And often that is also the way that you will prevent long-term complications from diabetes and those related metabolic disorders. Okay, I think we are ready to go to our next recipe. And we will let the greens finish cooking off camera. Our next recipe is tricolor coleslaw. We start with 2 cups of green cabbage sliced very thin, 2 cups of red cabbage sliced very thin, 2 cups of carrot, grated or cut into matchsticks. And then a simple dressing is a 1/2 cup of vegan mayonnaise, a 1/2 teaspoon of celery salt, and 1 teaspoon of seasoned vegetable salt. So if you want to make your own vegan mayonnaise, you can go to my website at theharvestcook.com, and you will find a recipe for an easy, very simple homemade vegan mayonnaise. And you can also find a recipe for my vegetable seasoned salt, which is a nice salt seasoned with different herbs that I use for a lot of different recipes and that I will be using in this recipe. So that's one of the places where you can find that, just under the recipe tab on that page. So next we're going to be looking at tricolor coleslaw. You can see what the 3 colors are, the purple, the green, and the orange. The colors tell us that this is going to be a salad really full of phytochemicals, all of which our body needs for best health. But another really important benefit of these are the high fiber, because once again, that's going to be helping us with insulin resistance. You know, when we talk about insulin resistance, what we're talking about is that when insulin tries to get carbohydrates into the cell of the body, the tissue cell, sometimes it has an easy time of it. It's kind of like there's a wall and insulin is like a wrecking ball. It's not quite so clumsy, but if the wall is thin and easily breached, then the insulin doesn't have to work hard to make a hole for the glucose to go in. On the other hand, if that wall is very thick and very tall, then insulin has to work much harder to make an entrance for the sugar. When sugar can't come out of your blood, it circulates in the blood and raises blood sugars, and you run into problems like prediabetes and type 2 and type 1 diabetes. The insulin sensitivity that we're talking about today is important for both diabetics type 1 and type 2, and the other types as well, because it doesn't matter what type of diabetes you might be suffering from, and we know that a large proportion of the American population is at some stage of diabetes today. It doesn't matter which type of diabetes, the more insulin sensitive you are, the less complications you are going to have long term from those blood sugar issues. It means you will have fewer problems with your kidneys, your eyesight, you're likely to be able to keep your digits and your legs and things like that that we all would kind of like to preserve. And the insulin sensitivity is a huge piece of preventing those complications, because you need fewer medications and your blood sugars will be better controlled. So here we are looking at 2 kinds of cruciferous vegetables again. We have the red cabbage, some people call it purple cabbage. I think it's just a really beautiful color, whether you call it purple or red. And then we'll mix in the green cabbage. And then we will add the carrots. Carrots are high in beta carotene, helps your body to make vitamin A, which is needed for your eyesight, eye health, and many other functions. Just going to toss this a little bit, and then we're going to make a very simple dressing with some of this vegan mayonnaise, and we're just going to add the celery salt and the vegetable seasoned salt to it. Stir it up together. And then we will toss it with the salad. This is one kind of dressing you can use on this salad. This homemade vegan mayonnaise is much lower in fat than most commercial mayonnaises and many other salad dressings. Now, why is fat important? Well, guess what? Fat is the most important nutrient when it comes to insulin resistance. When people talk about prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, they often think about the need to avoid sugar. But the truth of the matter is that your basic root problem has to do with getting blood sugar into the cell. And the thing that contributes to insulin resistance is not the amount of sugar you eat, it is actually the amount of fat that you eat. You can take perfectly healthy medical school students, put them on a high-fat diet for 4 to 6 weeks, and turn most of them into diabetics just by giving them a high-fat diet. It's because fat goes into the cell and it makes it much, much more resistant to insulin. So then your pancreas has to work harder to make more insulin, to make a bigger wrecking ball, to get that hole in the cell wall that the glucose can get into. And so that is what really raises your insulin resistance. So when you're looking to increase sensitivity and improve your metabolism, it is so important to really watch the fat. And so you will notice that the recipes we're doing today have low or no fat in them. And that's on purpose because, well, we've talked about insulin sensitivity as relates to pre-diabetics and diabetics, but it's not just for diabetics. In fact, do you know that today scientists are starting to refer to Alzheimer's as diabetes type 3? Why would they do that? It's because it's associated with insulin resistance, just like prediabetes and regular diabetes. In fact, we find that insulin resistance contributes to high blood pressure. Sometimes that's a sign that you are becoming insulin resistant. So if you would like to prevent Alzheimer's and have your cognitive function till the end of your days, you will want to be thinking about how to eat in a way that will really optimize your insulin sensitivity, because it affects so many parts of your body. Now, let's take a look at our next recipe, which is an alternative salad dressing. This is actually an oil-free salad dressing. I call it Lucia's lemon vinaigrette dressing because it's a vinaigrette style. And it takes 1/3 cup of oil substitute, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, a teaspoon of salt or to taste, and a teaspoon of Bragg's aminos. I would add the salt at the end so that you can actually do it to taste. So for this no oil, no fat vinaigrette, this is just a great way to make a dressing that is oil-free but still kind of has that texture of an oil-based vinaigrette and will kind of stick to your salad instead of all kind of just dripping right down to the bottom of your bowl. And the key to this oil-free dressing is this textured water. So this is where I need you to grab your pen and paper because it's very, very simple. It is 1 cup of water, bring it to a boil, and add 1 tablespoon of arrowroot that was mixed with a little bit of water. So you dissolve the arrowroot, the 1 tablespoon of arrowroot in like 2 tablespoons of water. Bring the cup of water to a boil. When it's boiling, get your whisk out and whisk in the pot while you pour in the arrowroot, and it will thicken. And when it chills, you'll get this kind of oily, textured material. And it helps to kind of feel slick in your mouth a lot like oil, so you kind of get the mouth feel. It's kind of interesting. But it's just arrowroot and water. If you want to reference it, you can always go back to my website because this recipe is also on the website. But it was so simple, I just knew you could probably write it down. So I take this oil substitute base, and for this recipe we're using 1/3 of a cup. A full recipe will make 1 cup for you. And I'm just going to add the Bragg's, and I'm going to add the Italian seasoning. And that's basically all you need with some salt to taste for your vinaigrette. You can vary this in a lot of different ways. I would add the salt at the end so that you taste it first and make sure you don't get it too salty. Just going to put some of that in right now. But you can see that here you have a nice vinaigrette, and it's got a nice thickness to it, so it feels like a salad dressing and not just flavored water. And so this is a really great way to dress your salads without having to use a lot of oil. In fact, you don't need any oil. And this can be a huge step in the direction of becoming more insulin sensitive. Now, there are some variations. This is like just a basic recipe, but you can kind of change up the flavors by the things you decide to add to it. So let me share some variations that you can use. For example, you can leave the salt out, and if you like to try new things, you can try what's called umi vinegar, or sometimes umeboshi vinegar. It's a Japanese pickle juice, and it's actually not a vinegar. I don't actually show recipes with vinegar, but it's called vinegar. I think that's how they translated it from the Japanese, and it's actually just the salty, tart juice from a special Japanese plum pickle. You can find it in the Asian section of a lot of stores. Asian stores will all carry it, as well as many health food stores and even some supermarkets. Sometimes you can even find it at Walmart. So using umeboshi gives it a little bit of a different flavor twist. It's a little tart and a little salty. Something else you can do is add a teaspoon of garlic to it and make more of a garlicky flavor. Or if you like it sweetened, I suggest using just maybe 1 teaspoon to this amount of salad dressing of something called just date syrup. And basically it's just medjool dates liquefied. There's nothing added to it. There are no free sugars. It's a whole food. Nothing's been taken away. There's no refining, but it will give you that nice sweet flavor. Something else you can try if you want to experiment is like 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of sumac powder. You'll often find that in the herb section of your grocery store, and it's made from a flower, and it also has a bit of a tartish flavor and is nice on salads. So those are different ways that you can kind of mix it up and use different variations to make this more versatile dressing. But the real key is having that oil-free substitute as a base. So this is more of a clear dressing. You can use this sort of a dressing on the tricolor coleslaw or on other tossed salads as well. Now I'd like us to look at that graphic for just a minute or two, and you will notice that 8 is completely plant-based, but it's the one that is the least helpful for insulin sensitivity improvement. As we go up the numbers from 8 to 12, it will improve your insulin sensitivity. So at 8, for example, you have 100% plant-based. That means you have already cut out animal products. If you're still in the stage where you're eating animal products, contact me and I can take you through the steps 1 through 7 that help you get over to the plant-based. Because a lot of times going step by step is easier than try to make some large change overnight. I think breaking it down into steps is just a much simpler way to do it. So once you have eliminated animal products from your diet, you're ready for step 8, where everything is plant-based, you're eating some breads, higher glycemic index foods, those are things that raise your blood sugar quickly, and dried fruit. If you want to move on to the next step and become more insulin sensitive, then you want to think about avoiding irritants, things that add inflammation to your body, like hot spices and cloves and things like that. You will want to start eating legumes on a daily basis, some kind of bean or lentil or chickpea or something every day, because those are super beneficial for improving insulin sensitivity. Once you've feel like you've mastered that step, you might be ready to move on to step 10, where you eliminate all refined foods. So there's no oil or no sugar, but you've figured out by then, you've learned hopefully how you can replace those things and still really enjoy your food. Really limiting processed foods, still have some foods that spike blood sugars a little bit more. But you can keep moving on as you move on to 11, where you go to all unrefined and unprocessed. And by that time, about 50% of your food's probably raw, just because you're eating lots and lots of vegetables and fruits. And many people find that by that step, they can normalize blood sugars. They can reverse prediabetes. They can see their blood pressures come down. There's a lot of benefits that you can see with every single step you take. So I don't want anybody to be discouraged because you are at any particular step, because it doesn't matter. You don't have to be at 12 to get benefits. I just wanted to show you an idea of how step by step we can make choices that really can impact our health for the better. If you have questions about this or you want to contact me, you'll be able to do that with the contact information at the end of this program, so you can get ready for that. So that kind of covers it for our salad dressings. We're going to go to our last recipe for today, which is a quick stir fry. It calls for 1 cup of soy curls, 2 cups of water, 2 teaspoons of vegan chicken style seasoning, 1 tablespoon of light olive oil, 1 onion cut thinly, 2 cloves of garlic crushed, and 2 carrots peeled and cut diagonally in very thin slices. You'll also need 1 stalk of celery sliced thinly on the diagonal, 2 cups of green cabbage sliced into thin shreds, 2 teaspoons of Bragg's aminos, 1 teaspoon of chicken style seasoning or to taste, and the juice of a fresh lemon. This quick stir fry is a great way to increase the number of vegetables on your plate, as well as getting a lot of nutrient-dense foods in one place. And in fact, because of the protein piece in this, this actually could make a great one-dish meal. We are going to start by taking the soy curls. These are a dehydrated whole soybean product. You can get it on Amazon if you don't find it in your local store, even though a lot of local stores are carrying it these days. And it makes a really nice, like chicken-like substitute for the stir fry. I'm going to add the chicken style seasoning to the curls, and that way when they hydrate, they take up that flavor. And I'm putting some hot water on them. And then we're going to let them hydrate while we work on our other vegetables. This is one of those dishes where you're going to want to slice and dice and prepare all of your ingredients before you start the cooking process, because it goes pretty quick. One of the things I like about stir fries is that your vegetables aren't overcooked. You preserve a lot of the colors as well as a lot of the nutrients. It's kind of fun to learn how to cut these vegetables. You will notice, for example, that my onions are cut just into little circles, or they're not really circles. They're kind of like a moon shaped. And you just stand your onion straight up and down and do thin slices, and you'll get that cutting all the way around your onion. For the carrots, it helps if everything is sliced thinly because it will cook faster. And you don't want to have to wait for thick chunks of vegetables to cook while your onions and your garlic are just getting over soft. So there's several ways you can do it. I like to use a mandolin, and I just peel a carrot, cut it down the middle vertically, so it's 2 thin pieces, hold it at an angle with my mandolin, and just slide it back and forth. And then it gives you nice, thin, like diagonals. So that's a really great way to get your thinly cut carrots. You could also grater them, but then they don't quite enough hold their shape as well, and your stir fry isn't quite as pretty. Or if you're good with a sharp knife, you can also just do it with a knife. I'll show you how to do that with the other half here. Put the flat side of your vertical carrot down on your board, and then just take little thin slices like this. And the diagonal just kind of adds some visual interest to the vegetable, so then everything's not the same shape. And of course, you can be as creative as you want, but this is kind of a standard, traditional stir-fry cut. So with the celery, we do the same thing. I just take the celery stem on an angle and then just slice just thinly and diagonally, and you'll get all of those attractive little green slices. So now we have everything ready. I go ahead and start my pan heating. You want to start with a pretty medium-high heat, and that will allow you to sear the onions and the garlic. And we just keep stirring it, and then we won't need to put any oil in. We will use a little bit of water if needed to keep things from sticking. I'm going to go ahead and crush my garlic so I can throw it in as soon as I'm ready for it. And we're going to put in 2 big cloves of garlic. A variation you can do to the quick stir fry is to also add some finely chopped fresh ginger. A tablespoon or so will add a little zing to your stir fry and is a very nice addition. But if you're in a big hurry, you don't have to have a lot of ingredients. You can just kind of use what you have on hand. So here's our garlic all ready. I'm going to turn this up just a little bit. And you will notice at the beginning that the onions are starting to sweat. They're starting to release water, but it might not be enough to keep it from sticking. So you want to really keep an eye on it. Using a non-stick pan will help you to reduce even the amount of water that you need to use to keep it cooking. Now, because everything is sliced thinly, we don't have to let these cook very long. I usually add the things that are the toughest or take the longest time to cook next. So like I'm going to add the celery, and I'm going to add the carrots. And the cabbage cooks really fast, so we're going to do that one last. And I'm also going to add a little bit of water right down here in the middle and put my garlic in that. You have to be careful that the garlic doesn't burn, because that changes the flavor and it doesn't taste too good. Keep that moving. You just kind of want it to get aromatic. You start to smell it and then stir it into the rest of everything. And it's better to add a small amount of water often than it is to add a whole bunch and kind of get stuff swimming, because then things steam instead of sauteing. And that is a little bit different technique and not as good for stir fry. So I'm going to add just a little bit as I see it, the bottom's drying up. And when you add it, then you kind of go around with your spatula and wet the whole bottom of the pan. It kind of brings up any of the browning that might have occurred, keeps it from burning, and puts a nice flavor into your dish. We have here with the cabbage and these different veggies, another really good high fiber dish, another thing that's so excellent for your insulin sensitivity. And this is a really nice way to do stir fry, because most stir fries have quite a bit of oil in them. But you can see that you can make a really delightful stir fry completely oil free simply by using this little dry pan technique. I don't even call it water sauteing because I don't actually cover the bottom of the pan with water. Just add little bits as I need just to keep it from sticking, nothing more. You'll see there's still a little moisture on the bottom of the pan. So we're good. And as these start to soften, we will add the soy curls. Let's see if they're rehydrated. Yes, you'll notice that they've plumped up nicely, so we can put those in. And we'll allow them to kind of blend with this. And another idea is that when you are soaking the soy curls in this chicken broth, you can also use the chicken broth for the liquid that you need to add as well, instead of just water. So that's another option that you can do. But by the time it gets to this stage, you usually don't have to add much more water. You can notice that things are starting to sweat and to wilt a little bit. The carrots are starting to get a little bit supple. They're not so crisp anymore. And personally, I really enjoy my stir fry where it's still kind of crispy. There's some crispiness to it. Not raw, but not limp and completely overcooked either. So I think it's just about ready to put in the cabbage. And then we'll go ahead and put in the Bragg's aminos. And I'll basically just keep it stirring until the cabbage is wilted. And once the cabbage wilts, we are done. And you'll notice how the heat just brings out the beautiful colors in the vegetables. And the soy curls, because they're made from soybeans, really do give you a nice protein in this dish and would make it a one-dish meal. You wouldn't have to have anything else with this meal. You could fill up as much as you could eat of this until you were satisfied, not overdoing it, and you would find that you will not have to worry about having too many calories or your sugar spiking. This is a really wonderful dish for diabetics and pre-diabetics. But maybe you're not a diabetic or a pre-diabetic, but you're still curious as to how your insulin levels are doing. Well, there are ways that you can check that. On my website, if you go to the home page, you will find that there's a button that says, yes, I want the assessment. And what it does is it will allow you to download for free an assessment handout that allows you to get your lab tests from your last doctor's appointment, do some real simple biometrics, things like putting down your height and your weight and figuring out your BMI and some things like that. That's body mass index, by the way. But you can do all of that just following the directions in that handout and give yourself a score that will give you a really good idea of what are some areas of health that you might want to address to optimize your health and to prevent any problems with insulin sensitivity. So I just wanted you to know that you have that resource available. Now you can see that things are starting to soften up pretty nicely. I think we're just about done with the cooking stage of this particular dish. Things are just kind of still crispy, not totally limp, and the color is still really nice. And so here we have a beautiful stir fry that you can use if you want to add to it a side of rice. Whole grain brown rice is something good that you can do. But you can use this and you can vary it. Use your own creativity. You can add different vegetables to it. You can change the proportions of the vegetables. You can add, for example, zucchini or eggplant slices, or you could add more onion or more garlic or more celery. You could add some green leafy vegetables as well if you prefer. So there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of mix it up. With these simple recipes that we've talked about today, it is really easy to make variations. They aren't recipes that you have to follow to the T for them to turn out. You'll probably want to make them the way they're written once, so you know what they're supposed to be like, and then you can play with them and do different things. But I really want to encourage you to think about, as you've heard the different things we've talked about today in regards to the importance of becoming insulin sensitive and some of the real good ways we can do it, think about how you can use this in your own life? Is there something you could do to increase your insulin sensitivity? Is there somebody you know who you might want to share this program with because maybe they need to hear what we talked about today? Many doctors today are not going to tell you much about how to eat for insulin sensitivity because it's not part of their training. They're never told how to do that. So I would just invite you to, if you really enjoy doing this, to think about learning to do more of this insulin sensitive type cooking. I actually do cooking programs twice a month, and you can get into that Art and Science of Plant-Based Cooking club as well, if that's something you're interested in doing, because then we just cook together, and I do it on Zoom, and you can be in your kitchen cooking as I'm in my kitchen cooking, and we have a great time together. And all of the things we cook are things that are going to carry you along that path to the healthiest, most insulin sensitive type of eating. So let me know if that's something that's interesting to you. Feel free to contact me. There are more recipes on my website, as well as the ones that I shared with you here today. So there's all kinds of resources that can help you take the next step as you move forward. So I just want to say thank you for being with us here today. We are going to take a look at how you can contact me, and then we will review all of the different dishes we have seen today.
Did you like the recipes that you saw on today's program and want to know more? You can write to Lucia Tiffany at 3844 Grizzly Creek Road, Oroville, California 95965. You can also text her at 530-712-3664. That's 530-712-3664. You can also visit her website at luciatiffany.com. That's luciatiffany.com, or email her at lucia@luciatiffany.com. That's lucia@luciatiffany.com.
So today we started with the hearty breakfast cereal, Oat Groat Delight. And you know, that's another one you can vary. You can actually use barley instead of oat groats. Same, everything else the same. Now our next recipe that we're going to look at here was the quick stir fry, the one dish meal option with lots of veggies and cabbage. Next, we had the not so southern collards. Not so southern because these were fat-free and not overcooked. We also showed you the tricolor coleslaw that has 3 bright colors to feed us the nutrients that our bodies need. And lastly, we did also present the Lucia's Lemon-Grette, which is a vinegar-free lemon juice and oil substitute based salad dressing. So that was the dishes for today. Now I want you to think about what we just did today and pick one of these to try in the next week. You know, if we just sit and watch and learn about new things we can do, but we don't do something about it, sometimes we forget and we don't actually get the benefit. But I want you to get the benefit of becoming more insulin sensitive. So think about what can you do in terms of the choices you make in your meals to really help your body to be more insulin sensitivity, to metabolize carbohydrates better, and to avoid things like prediabetes, diabetes, and Alzheimer's. So happy cooking. I hope that you truly enjoy these dishes as much as I have enjoyed presenting them to you. I want to thank you for taking your valuable time today to be with us. And remember that health is wealth. And with every healthy choice, you are getting richer.